If you're thinking about buying a house this year, you should think again. And here are my 5 exact reasons why. Minimum versus maximum cost, changing cost of payments, cost of entry, and the interest curve. So minimum versus maximum cost. When you rent, the max you will pay for housing each month is that rent number. You always know what it is so that you can have a steady, predictable budget. This can bring a lot of peace of mind because you know what's coming and you can have a steady, predictable budget. That really frees you up to focus on other things like your savings and investing goals. It wouldn't be totally unreasonable to have your emergency savings be not quite as much, maybe more around 3 months worth of expenses as opposed to 6 months worth of expenses. Because homeowners definitely need that 6 months worth of emergency fund because expensive things on houses break, like roofs, and they cost like $14,000 to replace. A simple leak in your bathroom could cost you $10,000. And if your sewer backs up on just one day and you have to call Roto-Rooter, you're probably looking at about $600. When you buy a house, the mortgage is the minimum you will pay each month to live there. If you bought a fixer-upper, you can expect regular repairs. At our last house, which was definitely a fixer-upper, we were calculating that we spent about $1,400 per month on renovations alone. Yes, we bought that fixer-upper to get a good deal so that our payments wouldn't be too high, but we ended up spending all of that extra money on renovations. And not unnecessary renovations, more like this deck is a total hazard, and if someone puts their foot through it, which could totally happen because all the boards are bending, that could be a major problem and an ER bill. So it's interesting to think about whether or not that house was actually worth it. And we'll actually get to hear about all those calculations because we're actually going to sell that house this year, hopefully. So the big question for that house is, was it worth it at all? So we'll actually get to figure that out pretty soon because we're planning on selling that house this year, and then I'll make a video about all those calculations. Now, when I said $1,400, that was materials only. That didn't have any labor attached to it. We did all the labor ourselves. We spent pretty much every single weekend working on that house. And that leads me to the next point, which is the cost of time. When you rent, your time is mostly your own. Maybe your landlord schedules an inspection here or there and you want to spend some time cleaning up, making sure the house doesn't look like a total pig pen before they show up. But that's basic life stuff. Houses need to be livable clean. When you own, you kind of belong to the house in a way. You are the caretaker of that house. When the house demands your time, you have no choice but to give it to it. It's kind of like a time monster. When your sewer backs up, you are calling out of work, taking unpaid leave to go and deal with this problem. And you have to pay for all the expenses of it. You are the one calling the first plumber and then the second plumber because the first one didn't pick up to figure all that out. The next thing that really caught me off guard with owning a home is the changing payments. I think this is kind of a myth and I'm not exactly sure where it started, but I definitely believed this before I bought my first house. It's like the glory of having a mortgage. You get the exact same payment for 30 years and then it just goes away because you've paid off your house. Boy, was I wrong. There are 2 main things that change about your mortgage cost, and that is the cost of insurance and the cost of property taxes. And these are not insignificant things. It's not unusual for insurance to go up by $1,000 a year. These last few years have been really bad for that, and property taxes never go down. It seems like the assessor is driving by our house every 6 months and deciding that it's suddenly worth more money, which means now we have to pay more property taxes. So it's not actually unusual for your whole mortgage payment to go up by at least $100 a year. And there's no getting away with property taxes, even if you pay off your entire house. If property values keep skyrocketing the way that they have in the last 30 years, you can expect your property taxes to also skyrocket. So by the time you do pay off your mortgage, your property taxes might start looking more and more like another mortgage. When you rent, in a way, you have more control of the cost. Sure, you don't necessarily get to pick your paint colors or rip out your kitchen and put exactly what you want in, but you get to pick the cost. It's not unusual for rents to go up every year, but you are also normally only tied to one specific rental 1 year. If there are some ridiculous rent hikes coming, you can decide to move. You can leave the situation, you can leave your landlord and find something better. You could find something less expensive. You could decide this is the year for travel. You're gonna live in a very small apartment so that you can spend all that extra money exploring the country, going on a road trip, whatever it is that you want to do. There is no 30-year contract when you're a renter. Now let's talk about the cost of entry. When you move into a rental, it's pretty common to have a security deposit that is worth 1 month worth of rent. So if you're renting a place that's $2,500 a month, you will be providing a security deposit of the same amount. And that's not an insignificant amount of money. I'm not arguing that. But let's look at what it would be like to get into a house. At the moment, the average house cost in the United States is $400,000. Now you might be thinking, I don't need the average house for my very first house. You're willing to do the whole fixer-upper route. That's fine with you. So let's say that you're gonna buy a house for $300,000. In scenario one, you're putting down 10% to make sure that your payments aren't too high so that you have extra money left over for all those repairs. 10% is $30,000. Now that's a lot of money and it takes a long time to save that amount of money. This would make your monthly payments approximately $2,100, including your insurance and property taxes. But let's say you don't have $30,000 in the bank, but you would still like to get into that house. The lowest you can often put down is 3%, and 3% of $300,000 is $9,000. That is still 3 times as much as that security deposit would be, and that drives your payments up. Now you're looking at $2,300 a month before repairs. And if you're buying a house that's only worth $300,000, I can pretty much guarantee that it's gonna need some pricey repairs. Of course, unless you buy a 1-bed, 1-bathroom, 800 square foot house. Now let's talk about the unexpected way that buying a house might not be worth it, and that is the interest curve. There are 2 main parts to your mortgage: the principal, the value of the house that you are paying down, and the interest, the fee that you are paying the bank in order to borrow that money so you can buy the house now. When you first buy that house, you are basically only paying interest on that loan and you're barely paying down any of the principal. So your interest payments are probably going to account for about 83% of your mortgage at the beginning. It isn't until month 222 when your principal payments start to exceed what you're paying with interest. That means for 18 and a half years, you are paying more interest to the bank than you are paying down your loan. If you have a $2,000 a month mortgage and at the beginning, you're paying 80% in interest payments, that means you're paying $1,600 a month just to interest. I know there's a lot of talk out there about how rent is throwing away your money, but using that same logic, don't you think interest would be also? Now let's think about this for a minute. If you are paying mostly interest for the first 10 years, this means that it would be beneficial to stay in your exact same home and not sell it for at least 10 years, right? And you might be thinking, well, what about appreciation? Well, appreciation works in the same way. It takes time. The longer you stay, the better it will probably be, but it's not guaranteed either. Over a 30-year period, your house will likely go up in value, but over a 5-year period, maybe not. The house that we have owned for 3 years has actually not gone up in value at all. That means we've been paying mostly interest for 3 years, and if we sold it, there probably would be very little profit, if any. When you sell a house, it normally costs about 10% of the house's value. So if you're selling a $400,000 house, we're talking about $40,000 to sell it. And that pretty much wipes away any equity you have gained from principal paydown or appreciation if you sell it within that first 5-10 years. What do you think? Are there advantages to actually owning a house? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. See you in the next one. Bye for now.